AGATHA all along, episode 5. Break down. That shit was cold.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. This will be my full AGATHA All Along episode 5 video. Couple really big reveals. Obviously, what's really going on with Teen, aka Billy, getting his full-on magical crown. So we'll break it all down. I know there's a lot of questions about what his powers are going to be in the MCU compared to
Just
Scarlet
like
Witch's
Scarlet
powers. There are a couple big
Witch.
confirmations about what's going on with Nicholas Scratch. So if you're brand new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the episodes. Careful for spoilers if you have not seen the episode yet. Just starting at the beginning, we'll go through shot by shot, talking about Easter eggs and WTF
That
moments.
shit was so
Probably one of the best episodes of the
unexpected.
season so far, so we'll see how they top this, the back half of the season. Big reminder that there'll be 9 episodes total, so we're about halfway through. The episode title was Darkest Hour, Wake Thy Power, which is a reference to the next line of the Ballad of the Witches Road, that song that they sing. Each of the titles of the episodes is based on lines from the Ballad of the Witches Road. But it's also aligned to Agatha and Billy waking their powers again, or Billy for the first time, technically. Billy coming into his power. Notice he forms the magical crown, just like Scarlet Witch's magical crown. Now, he
Yeah,
doesn't
it's a
wield
baby
chaos
crown.
magic the exact same way that she does. Like, there's only one Scarlet Witch in the MCU. But all of his powers
They're
and his
gonna
abilities are basically the exact
destroy
same as
anyone.
Scarlet Witch's. So the way his powers work, too, like the way he wields magic, is the same way that Scarlet Witch wields power. You also notice the way he uses his fingers, like the little finger movements, are just like Scarlet
Scarlet
Witch's finger movements
Witch.
when she's using her chaos magic. Like mother, like son. He's going to be a real mama's boy inside the MCU, like Tony Stark, like Thor, like a lot of Marvel characters. One of the big differences between them and a witch like Agatha Harkness or other magic users like Doctor Strange or Loki is that Scarlet Witch, for instance, and now Billy too, because he's just like her, don't actually need to speak spells or like learn from books how to cast spells or incantations. They can basically point at something and just make it happen. What they'll probably do, though, is they'll find a way to differentiate their abilities just a little bit so that they aren't exactly the same when they're together on screen in really big Avengers movies, or when we eventually see Scarlet Witch show up and he meets her. Or I guess
Shit,
meets
Avengers
her
gonna
again,
be
technically, because
unstoppable
this will be
if
the
they got
second time.
both of
I
them
know there are a lot of
at full
questions about
power.
how Billy can be Billy. Like, didn't he die when the Hex went down? We saw a version of him in another universe, in the 838 universe during Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. How is he suddenly back in Joe Locke teenage form?
Hopefully
What
they
they're
tell
doing on
us
the show is
how.
trying to adapt a version of his comic book origin. So the idea in the MCU is that Scarlet Witch created Billy and Tommy out of nothing inside the Hex just because that's the way her chaos magic ability works. When she brought the Hex down, their bodies were destroyed, but their spirits lived on. There's a lot of theories about her laying the protection spell, the sigil, on him to protect him when he wasn't powerful enough to protect himself. And now that he's come into his power, the sigil might
gonna
fall
break
off
free.
because he is powerful enough to protect himself. So theoretically, in next week's episode, he will be able to speak his name, like the sigil won't stop him from speaking who he is. But here's the thing, in the comics, after Billy and Tommy were essentially destroyed, the way they came back in the later Young Avengers comics is that their souls were reincarnated into completely different bodies with other families. So like Billy was reincarnated into the body of Billy Kaplan, born to another family, so he grew up thinking that he was Billy Kaplan until he learned the truth that he was Scarlet Witch's son, and he had a twin brother named Tommy.
They
who had
gotta
also
find
been
each other
reincarnated into the
first,
body
then they
of
gotta
another
find their
family's kid.
mama.
So that's kind of the vibe that they're going with this version of Joe Locke's Billy. Like, his soul was just reincarnated into another body. And there's a brief reference about the timeline here too, like why is he a teenager and not younger? The episode, one of the rules of the Ouija board, like one of the disclaimers, say that it's for ages 3 and up. The reference there, it's also meant to be a bit of a joke, is that Billy is really only about 3 years old chronologically, even though biologically he looks like he's a teenager. You remember, WandaVision was about 3 years ago because that's how long Agatha was stuck in Scarlet Witch's spell, and that's around the time she created Billy out of nothing. There'll probably be a couple explainers in the next couple of episodes to explain how this all works, but also the idea of reincarnated souls into other bodies. I think that's why they were using Nicholas Scratch's spirit talking to Agatha during this, and the whole concept of the Ouija board and speaking to the spirits of the dead. The idea that Billy was a reincarnated soul in another person's body. The real
That's kinda
question
crazy.
is why he was reincarnated. Was it because of something that Scarlet Witch did before she died? And it's also a reminder that Scarlet Witch's soul can also come back as well too, if Billy's can
She
also be
didn't die.
reincarnated. Everybody just waiting for that Elizabeth
I already
Olsen
know.
cameo scene at some point. The other reference with the title is Darkest Hour is a
Hopefully
reference
she's
to
in
that
this
downer ending
series at
Empire
the end.
Strikes Back stuff, making it seem like things have really hit the fan. Like, oh no, what's going on now? Has Billy gone evil, going after all the Coven? That's also a bit of a
Low
wink at
key.
Scarlet Witch during Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, where she became the antagonist briefly. She kind of lost it a little bit. Also lost it a little bit during WandaVision, where she was holding people trapped inside the Hex. During the scene at the end where Billy chucks them all into the Swamp of Sorrows to make a never-ending story reference, I think it's sort of sucked under in the mud. That faraway look in his eyes makes it seem like he's not totally in control of what's happening here, like he's just doing it automatically based on emotion. Kind of the same way that Scarlet Witch did when she created the Hex. When they asked her how she did it, like Agatha asked her, how did you do this? Like she was just full of all this emotion and it
You
just
just
came
gotta be
out of her
careful
in the
not
form
to
of the
attack
Hex.
Agatha.
So that's kind of what's happening with
She
Billy
gonna
here,
take
throwing
away
them
his
all in the
power.
mud. He will probably, early theory, he will save them from dying before they all get sucked under completely. Like, oops, I kind of lost myself there for a second. Sorry about that. You can see him reacting to this too. Like, wait a minute, why do I have a crown on my head right now? What's going on here?
You're so much like your mother.
This shit was a
My
good
early
part.
theory is that he still thinks that he's Billy Kaplan and he doesn't fully know that Scarlet Witch is his mother. Because notice at the end of the episode, Agatha says, "You're just like your mother," but she does not speak the name Scarlet Witch. She just says, "Your mother." So you see that look of confusion on Billy's face, like, what? Who are you talking about?
She gonna
But they actually
save
started
her
the
to
episode with
try
a
to find
recap
out
of
who's her
Agatha's
mom.
backstory that we saw during WandaVision, how she killed her mother, her original coven back in Salem in the late 1600s, to remind you of both her history with her and her mother in her mother's coven and her connection to the Salem 7 from the comics. They're basically changing them in the MCU and saying that they're the descendants of those original witches from the coven that Agatha killed, looking for revenge. But the Salem 7 are a group from the comics connected to Nicholas Scratch, but in the comics, Nicholas Scratch also survives to adulthood and becomes a leader in the Salem 7. So it's like a completely different vibe in the comics. Also in the comics, they have animal-like abilities. They look kind of like animals at times, but in the MCU, they're just saying their powers are turning into animals. The opening scene starts on the Salem 7 entering the Witch's Road through the seeming hole where they summoned Rio, the portal where
Gotta
she entered the
run.
road through the ground. And the way they explain is they left a magical door open, quote unquote, like they didn't close the portal itself. They
And
find objects that Agatha's coven left
freaky
behind and
ass
use it to track
witches.
them down. Lilia is woken by a vision that she has of them finding them in the future, because remember, she reads time. She alerts everyone and they take off. Notice how Rio seems kind of eager here. You watch Rio's reaction to like any big thing that happens in any of the episodes, it's usually the opposite of the way the other witches react. There were a lot of theories during episode 1 when she found Agatha that she was also connected to the Salem 7, like maybe Rio had something to do with the Salem 7 tracking Agatha down in Westview. But there are also a lot of moments in the episode where Rio sticks up for Agatha and tries to make excuses for her,
And
also trying to keep her mother's spirit from keeping her. Like, no, you can't have Agatha, she belongs to me. Like when the other witches are mad at Agatha for having killed all the original witches from her coven, leading to the Salem 7 coming after them, Rio says, well, she only killed those witches because they were trying to kill her. Jennifer also calls Rio a creepy lurker, and she has no retort for that. I think because death lurks everywhere, like metaphorically and kind of literally, because Rio, as we all theorize, is a version of death as a cosmic entity. She'd be omnipresent, like death is
the mistress
everywhere,
of
all
death.
around you, all the time. The idea, though, is that the Rio that we're seeing here interact with them is just like a small piece of her consciousness taking physical form briefly. Her true form is vast and cosmic, like she's incredibly powerful. Like most of the other cosmic entities that you've seen, they kind of tease that during Thor Love and Thunder a little bit. Agatha's joke about the moral of the story being always finish what you started is meant to be both a reference to how she should have finished off the witch's children back in the day, like Thanos style, you should have gone for the head. But it's also foreshadowing for them having to finish walking the witch's road, completing all the trials, finish what they started. When Billy suggests they all use the Hexen Besom to escape the Salem 7, that's just another name for a witch's broom, and they have the special
I
ceremony
thought
where
they were
they all
talking
pair
about the
up to
hex
actually
that
create
Wanda
them.
made.
There are a couple of jokes about how they say they don't ride brooms because it's been co-opted by pop culture, like in this very cringe thing to do now, riding on a broom, but secretly they all love it and really miss it once they're actually riding through the sky. And the other joke here is them playing into the trope, like some of the tropes about witches are true, like they do ride on brooms through the night sky past the blood moon. So
Imagine
it's
you
them
saw
actually
that shit in
doing
real
witchy
life.
things. They even released a funny
That would be
promo
some
before this
scary
episode
shit.
where they were joking about actually doing real witchy stuff this week.
Next time on Agatha All Along, we do some classic witch.
Rio seems like she's having the time of her life, just like walking the road for her is a big carnival ride. Remember, as a cosmic entity, she doesn't have the same consequences of the other witches on the road. Like, it's not possible for her to die on the road the same way it is for the other witches. When Lilia tells Billy to pray to the Divine Mother, I think that's meant to be another version of the MCU Mother Goddess, aka the Mother, Maiden, the triple goddess that Agatha worships and then references later in the episode, the thing that's in her brooch. There might also be a connection to Rio, like she said she's the original, aka like the Green Witch, as in the first Green Witch. So part of Rio's
Or
MCU
maybe
version of
the
death might be
only
based on that
Green
Mother
Witch.
Goddess character. But I think she's just meant to be Mistress Death in the MCU, and they're just giving her aspects of other characters, like saying other characters from lore are just different representations of her, but it's all meant to be the same Mistress Death character. I also think Lilia telling Billy to pray to the Mother is also a bit of a wink at his mother being Scarlet Witch, the most powerful magic user in the MCU universe. Like, pray to your mother because she's crazy powerful. Notice as they all have the time of their life riding on brooms through the sky, even Agatha seems like she's enjoying herself for the first time in centuries. Her weird look at Rio seems like she's just thinking back on when they were together a long time ago, all the killing that she got up to, stealing power from other witches, which she does later in this episode,
All that
and
killing
Rio claiming
while
their
it being
bodies because
romantic.
she is death and that's what she does. Seems like they used to do that a lot, and we'll get some more flashbacks to that, like with her killing witches and Rio just claiming the bodies. The power of the Witch's Road draws them back to the ground for the next trial, Rio having the most unhinged reaction, just screaming for fun. They step into a very Baba Yaga looking house in the woods, like right out of a horror story. The genre theme this week seems like it's 1980s horror supernatural movie, like vibes from the Poltergeist movie, from Exorcist, just a lot of supernatural horror, also because of the whole trope of the Ouija board. Some of the banners above the door, Westview and Eastview. Agatha has an evil number 3 on her jersey she's wearing here for this slumber party theme, because it is the third trial that they're on, and it is her trial. Also, purple is her color. Most of the
It's
colors
going
they
by
wear
pretty
is
fast
color-coded to their
too.
comic
The whole
book characters.
series.
Couple big Easter eggs in some of the specific
This
outfits,
last
though. For
episode
instance, Billy's outfit
don't
is
seem
meant
like
to
it
be the
was that
80s
long.
version of his comic book Wiccan outfit, complete with headband, which is also a callback to his Halloween outfit from WandaVision. On top of that, the blue headband is both a reference to the comics headband that he wears all the time, but also to the crown that he has over his head in the MCU once he comes
See
into
me
his
in the
power, like the same with
crown.
Scarlet Witch wearing the crown that she creates out of magic. So I think the idea is that in the MCU, he won't wear the headband from the comics all the time. He'll just have a crown that will form when he's using magic in a really big way. Like, not all the time, but when he's really weaving some powerful spell.
Just like everyone else.
You notice that Billy lost his
will be
spellbook
like
of notes while they
really
were on
like
the
the
brooms. That might
comics
come back to haunt them
related.
later, like the Salem 7 will probably find that book and use it to tail them. When Agatha says take the training wheels off to him, that's also foreshadowing for him coming into his power and starting to use it, throwing them
Oh, he
all
took
in
them
the
off
mud.
for sure.
They say that it's the blood moon when the veil between the living and the dead is at its thinnest, meant to be the souls of the dead, like the MCU version of the afterlife. We actually saw that during Moon Knight, like they literally
Knight, yeah.
traveled to the JUY, the Egyptian afterlife. The way they explain the afterlife in the MCU is that your consciousness after you die just travels to another dimension
Moon Knight
based
was
on your
crazy.
belief system
We need
or a
a season
contract
2.
that you formed with a higher cosmic being, like a god. So that's why Mark Spector's spirit went to the Duat, because even though he didn't believe in the Egyptian pantheon, he'd formed the contract with Khonshu, one of the Egyptian gods. For instance, Iron Man, Tony Stark of the 616 universe, even though we're talking about Robert Downey Jr. coming back as Doctor Doom, that's like a separate universe version. The 616 original Tony Stark from the MCU,
They're gonna
when he died,
get rid
would
of
have
the
gone to another
616
reality,
universe,
another dimension
supposedly.
based on his belief system. This is also a way
I
to
don't know, we'll
explain
see.
how they can speak to Nicholas Scratch, who's still in kid form because that's how old he was when he died, and how we'll also probably find out about Scarlet Witch and what happened to her after the events of Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness later in the series. Her spirit is still out there, just in another dimension. When they talk about the veil being thinner between the living and the dead, you could also look at that as a reference to the relationship between Agatha and Rio, because Rio is literally death. But in reality, the big part of the trial that this references is Agatha's confrontation with her mother's spirit. Notice this time, because the trial is set in the 1980s, they all have watches from that era denoting the countdown timer. I think
G-Shock.
at one point my dad had a watch like that. I don't know if I was ever old
That
enough
shit
to have
was
a
in
watch that looked that
style
nice.
for
Those
a
were actually
minute.
pretty expensive back in the day. Notice the depiction of death is on the cover of the Ouija game box. The Point Reyes poster in the background seems like a parody of a horror movie because everything in the trial is based on horror genre. One of the rules of the game is that you're not allowed to ask about death. I'm sure Rio was chuckling under her breath a little bit. Like, you point to her a couple times in the episode, and each time she seems like she's just having the time of her life, just having fun. Like, you're not allowed to ask about death because death is literally sitting right here. Don't want to give that away before the end of the series. There'll probably be some big episode where they all confront that because Agatha knows exactly what's going on with Rio, but
They gonna
none of
be
the
mad
other
as
witches
shit.
or even Billy knows what's going on with Rio. Seems like the first real big mysteries that they were revealing were what's going on with Nicholas Scratch and what's going on with Billy, aka Wiccan from the comics. Next, we'll probably get more to the idea of what's happening with Scarlet Witch and what's really going on with Rio. They said that the rest of the rules of the actual game, like don't take your hand off the board or you'll be possessed by a spirit,
They
setting
all
up
took
Agatha
it
being
off.
possessed by her mother's spirit. It's the closest I've felt to you in centuries. The additional disclaimer, like I said, for ages 3 and up is meant to be a joke about Billy because in chronological age, he's only about 3 years old. When they start the game, Agatha calls for the mother maiden the mother goddess she worships, the triple goddess of her brooch. The TV with the static in the background seems like a Poltergeist movie reference. There's a quick joke about Mrs. Hart trying to contact
trying
them,
to
but it's
fake
also
go
meant to be
crazy.
an Agatha joke because remember, Agatha keeps getting her name wrong because her real name was not Mrs. Hart, it was Mrs. Davis. So it's them figuring out that it's Agatha all along because they know that that's not her real name. Like, wait a minute, this is just you messing with us. They try the game again, and this time it's Death that contacts them. Rio also chuckles a little bit because she's sitting right there while it's happening. And part of the trial is that they punish Agatha. So the idea is, I think that the trial is completed, but maybe not in the way that originally they were supposed to complete the trial. Part of the idea, I think, is that she was meant
But
to
she
make
got her
peace with
powers
her mother
now, too,
never
though.
loving her, but that's not exactly
So
what
she
happens.
didn't really get
They believe the
punished.
punishment that's ordered by the trial itself is that they have to physically hurt Agatha, like they need to tie her down, slice her up, blast her with their power, which she does eventually wind up using to power herself back up again. Then she's actually possessed by her mother's spirit because they broke the rules of the game and they go full Exorcist movie. She even looks a
Hell
little bit like
nah.
Linda Blair did during that movie. Notice when her mother's spirit actually does show up, Rio says she hates ghosts and she's not allowed to keep Agatha. Like, no, she belongs to me because Rio is in love with Agatha. But it was weird to see Rio's reaction to the actual spirit
You
itself.
should have said
Like maybe it
something.
has something
Speak
to do
up.
with the cosmic rules governing what death is allowed to do. Maybe she doesn't have power over spirits the same way. They make a reference to Agatha trying to deal with her traumatic past with her mother, her upbringing. I think the idea is that her mother never loved her. Like she tells her, I should have killed you after you were born. You were born evil. But instead of Agatha making
Forgot
peace
about
with that,
that.
like she was probably supposed to be punished by having to make peace with that, Alice blasts her mother's spirit away and Agatha turns evil and begins sucking her power out. So R.I.P. Alice, who turns into another husk, but we do get a big Nicholas Scratch reveal. Billy sees that it's Nicholas Scratch, the spirit of her dead son, contacting them, who begs Agatha to stop. And everybody hears the little boy's voice. And he sounds about 8 or 9 years old, so that was about how
hell?
old he
I
was
didn't
when
hear
he
that.
died. We'll probably learn more about what really happened to him, like the circumstances behind
gotta go
how
back
he
and
died,
watch
but I think
it.
they're trying to imply that he was collateral damage of the Salem Seven's fight to try and kill Agatha all these many centuries. All those teasers for the Darkhold in earlier episodes just made it seem like the quest for the Darkhold, like Agatha's quest for power, led to Nikki becoming a collateral damage. Not that she traded Nikki for the Darkhold or anything like that, just that he became collateral damage for that quest. My early theory is that we might actually
She
see
had to get
the
one or the
spirit
other.
of
She had
Nicholas
to
Scratch at
choose.
some point. Like we'll actually see what he looked like
And
on
she
screen,
chose the
maybe in a
Darkhold.
flashback, or maybe as an actual ghost. My early theory is that that's part of Agatha's character arc during the series. Like, this is meant to be the redemption of Agatha in some way. She will, like, slowly come to terms with his death eventually. Notice then that Billy, following the rules of the game, like he's always a stickler for reading the manual and following the rules, this is actually going to help them later on by putting the game on the goodbye symbol, opening the door for them to get out. And now the idea is that Billy hates Agatha and kind of hates the rest of the coven too, because the rest of the
He went
coven feels
crazy.
like Alice is just collateral damage. Like, it's just the rules of the road. You know, we're all here for more power. People die. That's the way it goes. And Agatha, even though she seemed kind of remorseful at first, seems a little non-repentant after Billy tries to denounce her. Like, how dare you? Sees that her power has started to come back in like fits and spurts, but not completely. Like, she's not crazy powerful, but it started to come back. Like, she's on her way to getting it all back.
Billy just gotta be careful not to give her more power.
Kill the other members of the Coven and take their power as well too. When Lilia says death comes for us all, it's ironic because Rio is right here behind them. She came for all of them, technically to help them, but also part of the bargain that she made with Agatha. Like, what do you get out of this? Well, you get your power back if you steal the power and kill those other witches, and I get their bodies. So technically, she actually wants all these other witches dead too.
So she feeds on them,
Agatha
I'm
is
guessing.
Almost left behind with her mother's spirit, and she says, I can be
feeds
good,
on their
just
bodies.
like she said in the flashbacks when her mother's coven was about to kill her. Then Agatha reveals that she knows Billy is Scarlet Witch's son, saying you're just like your mother, referencing the events of WandaVision. The way that Agatha is playing this is meant to be like the twist at the end of episode 7, where she reveals and traps Scarlet Witch like, I've been watching you this whole time. You're not the only magical girl in town. Then they play that banger of the Agatha All Along theme song, except the twist this time is that Billy's power manifests and he controls all of it, mind controls them the same way that Scarlet Witch did with the sword agents outside the Hex, almost making them kill themselves. Billy chucks all of them in the bog because he's had enough of them, but like I said, if you look at that faraway look in his eyes, it seems like he's not totally mentally all there right now. The other important thing you might have noticed when he's doing this too, like when he's using his power against them, or you notice is missing is Rio, aka Death, cosmic entity.
Yeah, that's what I was saying now. Like, where the hell she's at?
To mind control Death the same way. They just wouldn't make sense. So early theory, when he comes to his senses and rescues them, Rio also walks up chuckling too, like she's just bemused by everything that's going on because she already knows everything about him. She knew that this was Billy, not Agatha's son, Nicholas Scratch. The way they on the cliffhanger, revealing his magical crown above his head, they actually play the Billie Eilish song, You Should See Me in a Crown. My early theory is that they begin next week's episode with him sort of coming to, like, realizing what he's in the middle of doing.
He's
like, oh my God,
turning into God mode.
And they all kind of make nice with each other. Like, they make peace briefly. And then he starts questioning Agatha. What did you mean by that? I'm just like my mother. And they start digging into the whole idea that he really is Billy Kaplan, a.k.a. Wiccan from the comics, Scarlet Witch's son. The next big question after that is about Scarlet Witch.
That's the only reason she's going to keep him alive.
Like,
well, he's going to keep her alive.
Where did Tommy come back to? My early assumption about that is that they'll save that for like another TV series, because supposedly they're working on another WandaVision spin-off besides the Vision TV series. So there's like 2 more WandaVision.
Hopefully they don't fuck it up.
You also notice his crown.
People been fucking up a lot of shit lately.
Light of his magic from the comics. He also had blue magic during the WandaVision series too. You can actually see him in the trailers here wielding it with the pentagram here. Not exactly sure what spell he's weaving. This will probably happen in a future episode.
The next one.
But overall, I think this is a much stronger episode than previous episodes, even though it was one of the shortest episodes of the series so far. Like, they're finally actually getting somewhere, revealing some big details about the characters, confirming a lot of our theories. I think most people thought that he was going to wind up being Billy. Everybody post all your reactions in the comments below and all your theories about the other big questions like what's going on with Scarlet Witch? Are we going to see Nicholas Scratch again on the series? How did he really die? And where is Tommy?
I hope we.
Now
I want to see him because everybody's talking about him.
For Elizabeth Olsen to come back for another cameo scene in some way. My full episode 6 video will post next week after they release it, so be sure to enable alerts for my channel so you don't miss that. There's a bunch of other big stuff happening this week. We're in the middle of Penguin episodes. They've been bangers so far. They're going to try to break the veil. Supposedly episode 4, the next one is going to be the best one so far. Everybody click here to learn about the Scarlet Witch movie they're actually working on right now. And click here for all my
that's going to be it.